Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez locked eyes with the President of the United States, boldly declaring that while both of them were raised in Queens, the defining contrast was that she lived in the real borough while he was insulated behind his wealthy father's gated property. She delivered this proclamation to an audience of 11 million viewers, flashing a calculated smile reserved specifically for moments she knew were destined to go viral. The auditorium erupted in raucous approval, instantly generating 80,000 social media shares before she even had the chance to sit back down. For a fleeting moment, it appeared to be her triumphant night. However, she had miscalculated her target, as Donald Trump simply laughed in response. It was not a polite political chuckle, but a genuine, unbothered laugh characterized by a thrown-back head, shifting shoulders, and crinkling eyes, a clear indication that her attack had inflicted absolutely zero damage. He responded by acknowledging her statement. They were indeed two kids from Queens, but he pointedly added that only one of them actually knew the current crime rate of their hometown, and it certainly was not her. With that single sentence, 11 million viewers simultaneously realized that the compound man who knew the borough better than she did into a battle over Queens territory, and he had come fully armed with hard statistics. The convention hall carried the distinct scent of fresh carpeting, radiating heat from the camera lights, and the overwhelming artificial sweetness of far too many floral arrangements attempting to make a massive space in Flushing feel like an intimate living room. The attempt failed. The room felt exactly like what it was, a theatrical stage set in Queens for two political figures who hailed from the borough but had spent the previous 7 years acting as though they originated from completely different galaxies. AOC had taken the stage first, dressed sharply in a navy blazer and a crisp white blouse, her earrings catching the bright stage lights every time she moved her head. And she moved constantly, as AOC has never been one to sit completely still, spending her entire public career in a state of perpetual motion. She perched at the table with the forward-leaning, elbows on the surface readiness of a bartender prepared to jump up at a moment's notice. 7 years walking the halls of Congress had not erased her service industry posture, because that very posture was the core of her brand. Trump, conversely, made his entrance from behind the stage curtain rather than the main doors, because he is not the type of man to walk through entrances that the general public has already utilized. He scanned the auditorium with the assessing gaze of a real estate tycoon evaluating a property. This was his domain. He grew up a mere 12 miles from this exact room, and his father had constructed apartment complexes within walking distance of the stage. For him, the geography of the room held a deep personal significance that no sterile hearing room in Washington, D.C. ever could. AOC launched her attack with a 4-minute tribute to the authentic Queens, not the political talking point, but the visceral reality. She spoke vividly of catching the Q44 bus at 6 in the morning, relying on the corner bodega to cash paychecks because the nearest bank was too far away, and listening to the rhythmic clatter of the elevated train through a drafty bedroom window that refused to close properly. She illustrated the borough with the specific love and unquestionable authority of a woman who had slung cocktails in these neighborhoods long before she ever served in the halls of Congress. Then, with a tilted chin and a sharp smile, she turned her focus back to Trump. She conceded that they were both from Queens, but emphasized the massive difference. She actually lived in the community while he resided in Jamaica Estates. She painted his upbringing as a sheltered existence defined by security gates, private driveways, and chauffeurs who drove him straight past the working-class neighborhoods without ever stopping. She commanded him not to lecture her about their shared hometown, when his only perspective came from looking out from behind his father's fence. The room detonated with noise. It was not the polite, managed clapping of a Washington committee hearing, but the raw, full-throated roar of a Queens audience thrilled to hear a local girl publicly voice exactly what working-class Queens residents always thought about the wealthy enclaves of Jamaica estates. The AOC cheering section, a youthful, diverse crowd sporting hijabs and union T-shirts, including one holding a hand-painted Bronx Girl energy sign, leapt entirely to their feet. Up in the press gallery, a Telemundo camera operator leaned over and whispered to his sound technician, Ayla Lomato, indicating he believed she had just rhetorically killed him. But Trump was still laughing. It was the laugh of a man who firmly owned the room, even when the room was actively laughing at him, because that level of unbothered amusement is a display of dominance, a signal that the incoming attack was received, analyzed, and ultimately deemed entertaining. Two kids from Queens, I love it, he declared, agreeing that she was correct about his upbringing. He proudly admitted he grew up behind a fence, but quickly pivoted to note that his father, Fred Trump, the man who built that fence, also built thousands of affordable apartments for working families across the borough. He challenged her team to look up the records in Coney Island, Brighton Beach, Jamaica, and Flatbush, asserting that his father had literally built places for the people of Queens to live. Trump then shifted to his own legacy, noting that when he eventually left Queens, he went on to build towering hotels and massive casinos. He acknowledged that while some ventures failed, that was simply the nature of business. But the fact remained that he built tangible things. Leaning forward, maintaining his weaponized grin, he delivered the counterstrike. He pointed out that the Congresswoman had also left Queens, but instead of building physical structures, she had only built an Instagram following. He then dropped a devastating metric, stating that since she took office and became the representative for the area, violent crime had skyrocketed by 70%. So two kids from Queens, he summarized, one built, one posted, and Queens knows the difference. The tone of the laughter in the room immediately morphed. The previously roaring AOC section fell into uncertain silence, realizing too late that their enthusiastic applause had been expertly redirected into the setup for Trump's crushing punchline, which landed before they had any time to recalibrate their reactions. In the neutral seating area, a woman wearing a uniform from the Bear Diner on Queens Boulevard, having rushed straight from her shift to attend, slowly uncrossed her arms. She had arrived as a spectator, but she was now watching the exchange with a highly critical eye. Trump dramatically produced a printed document, holding it aloft for the television cameras with a signature wave that looked like a cross between a trial attorney presenting a key exhibit and a fisherman proudly displaying his catch. He cited the FBI's Uniform Crime Report, emphasizing that it was not his personal data, but the federal government's official statistics. The data showed that crime in her specific district, the 14th Congressional District of New York, which encompassed parts of their shared Queens, was up 70% since she assumed power. He encouraged her team to verify the numbers, slyly suggesting he didn't believe she had ever actually checked them herself. Looking directly at AOC, he asked her a devastatingly straightforward question. Congresswoman, what's the crime rate in your district right now? AOC opened her mouth, closed it, and opened it again. It was not the pause of deep thought, but the frantic physical manifestation of searching for a missing fact. She was grasping for the statistic, much like someone blindly fumbling for a light switch in a completely unfamiliar room, hoping it was there, but coming up empty. The number was simply not in her head. It had never been there to begin with. 11 million live viewers watched this intellectual search fail in real time, witnessing a discomfort akin to watching someone pat down their pockets for a set of keys they already know are permanently lost. In the gallery, a woman wearing a J&M Laundry smock leaned forward, looking down at the Congresswoman with a very specific, harsh expression. It was the exact look of deep doubt a customer gives a mechanic who admits they have no idea what is wrong with a vehicle. The painful realization that the professional you are paying to know the details does not actually know them. Trump capitalized on the silence, mockingly reassuring the crowd that her ignorance was fine because she had been incredibly busy with private jets, Instagram, and international conferences in Munich. At the mention of Munich, AOC's hand instinctively gripped the edge of her chair, displaying the tense body language of a roller coaster passenger bracing for an unpredictable drop. Trump brought up her recent appearance at the Munich Security Conference, noting it was the major leagues of the international stage. He recalled that she was asked a remarkably simple yes or no foreign policy question. Should the United States commit military troops to defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion? Trump emphasized that virtually every foreign policy expert on Earth has a prepared answer for this scenario. Pulling out a transcript, he promised to read her exact verbatim response, purposefully including every single verbal stumble. He read it slowly, perfectly mimicking her cadence without excessive mockery, which was somehow far more brutal. Mockery can be brushed off as mean-spirited, but pure accuracy can only be refuted by proving it inaccurate. And these were her indisputable words. I think that this is such a, this is of course a very long-standing policy of the United States. He recited, looking up to note that he had counted 7 ums in a span of 40 seconds. The finishing blow on the topic came when Trump revealed that following this globally televised performance, she took to her Instagram account and literally referred to herself as just a silly girl. He stressed that Fox News didn't label her that. She branded herself with that title while global superpowers like China and Taiwan were actively watching her evaluate international security. When AOC weakly interjected that her comment was meant as sarcasm, Trump weaponized the defense. He agreed she was being sarcastic about her own geopolitical competence in front of world leaders, but coldly noted that she succeeded immensely because all the world leaders actually believed her. The word believed dropped into the auditorium like a heavy stone, plunging into a completely still pond, sending silent ripples of shock outward. Typing in the press section abruptly halted. In the AOC supporter section, a young man wearing a Tax the Rich shirt stared down at his mobile phone and refused to look back up at the stage. Someone in the third row let out a sharp, audible gasp, the involuntary bodily reaction to a rhetorical hit landing perfectly. AOC's chin, which had been held high in her signature defiant bartender pose since the evening began, visibly dropped half an inch, the exact physical distance a chin falls when a person hears an argument they know they absolutely cannot refute. Trump then shifted his persona. The entertainer and comedian retreated halfway, making room for the seasoned executive who had spent 5 decades scrutinizing financial expense reports and easily spotting line items that did not belong. He announced he wanted to examine how the Congresswoman spent her money, given her constant rhetoric about representing the working class. He cited a tweet from February 2025 where she proudly claimed to commute to Washington, D.C. via standard rail or commercial flights, painting herself as a regular person. He then violently contrasted this with April 2025 Earth Day, ironically when she was documented disembarking from a Bombardier Challenger private jet in Bakersfield, California. The jet cost $15,000 per hour, all for a political tour ironically named Fight Oligarchy. Trump noted the absurdity of fighting oligarchy from a private jet, bragging that while he has flown private his entire life, he never pretended it was an anti-oligarch crusade. He just called it a standard Tuesday. The gallery laughed again, starting in the neutral section and spreading outward as the audience struggled to differentiate between the comedic delivery and the damning factual evidence. Trump didn't stop there. He outlined $53,500 in campaign funds spent on luxury hotel accommodations specifically highlighting a $3,500 a night stay at the Vidara in Las Vegas. Trump pointed out that he knew the Vidara well, as he owned the adjacent building, and confirmed that staying there was the literal definition of oligarchy. The detail that truly amused him, however, was leaked staff emails revealing her insistence on nothing below a 4-star rating, citing that she was highly particular about her bedding's thread count. Relying on 40 years in the hospitality industry, Trump declared that a person obsessed with thread count is not a working-class fighter. They are a high-maintenance luxury customer. To drive the contrast home, Trump introduced the story of Gloria Reyes, a woman who owned a bakery in Corona, Queens, squarely within the Congresswoman's district. Gloria had operated her business for 19 years, rising every morning at 4:00 a.m. to knead bread dough. She slept on cheap sheets that she had to wash herself at the laundromat located across the street. Trump emphasized that Gloria was not concerned with luxurious thread counts. Her sole particularity was ensuring she made enough money to cover her monthly rent. In the gallery, the woman in the Queens Boulevard diner uniform nodded slightly. It was not an enthusiastic political nod, but the solemn agreement of a working-class woman who intimately knew the harsh reality of waking up in the dark at 4:00 a.m., recognizing immediately that a politician obsessed with thread counts had no true understanding of that life. That small nod served as a devastating verdict, carrying far more authentic weight than any polished newspaper editorial board ever could. With the audience sufficiently warmed up, the entertainer vanished entirely, leaving only the executive to read off cold, hard numbers. Trump explicitly warned the crowd that this next segment was not a laughing matter. The very atmosphere in the room shifted, turning heavy as he began reading off federal statute numbers and massive dollar amounts. He revealed that $900,000 of the Congresswoman's campaign funds had been funneled to a company called Brand New Congress, LLC, operated by her former chief of staff, Saikat Chakraborty. Every Federal Election Commission, FEC, filing listed these payments innocuously as strategic consulting, yet Chakraborty had publicly admitted on an MSNBC broadcast that his company actually managed all fundraising and volunteer operations. Trump laid out the law, labeling core campaign operations as mere consulting on federal forms constitutes illegal misreporting and a direct federal violation. He quoted a former FEC commissioner, notably not a Republican, who stated unequivocally that there was ample evidence to launch both a civil inquiry and for the Department of Justice to consider a full criminal investigation. He then transitioned to a second violation from March 2026, detailing 3 separate payments totaling $18,725 directed to a Dr. Brian Bowl in Massachusetts. The campaign's FEC forms classified this expenditure as leadership training. However, Trump exposed that Dr. Bowl was actually a licensed psychiatrist who provided therapy, not political leadership training. He painted a grim picture. $18,725 in hard-earned donor money collected from working-class people like Gloria, the baker who scraped together $20 a month to support the campaign, was secretly used to pay a personal psychiatrist while being fraudulently mislabeled. Trump looked directly at AOC, noting that Gloria now knew where her money went. AOC, visibly shaken, looked toward her legal counsel for support. Her attorney was furiously scribbling on a yellow legal pad, radiating the intense, focused energy of a lawyer desperately trying to avoid making direct eye contact with their client while on national television. The vast distance between AOC's eyes silently pleading for a lifeline and her attorney's eyes stubbornly fixed downward perfectly encapsulated a situation beyond legal rescue. Then, Trump deployed the ultimate trump card, an announcement only a sitting president could make with authority. He revealed that because the composition of the FEC commission had changed, breaking a previous 3-3 partisan deadlock, the previously dismissed 2019 complaint was now under active review alongside the newer 2026 complaint regarding the psychiatrist. He joked darkly that with 2 open complaints, she was currently beating his record of only facing 1 impeachment at a time. The gallery's brief laughter crashed into dead silence instantly. The joke contained a massive breaking news announcement and facts spoken into 14 microphones before 11 million witnesses instantly solidify into permanent reality. In the press box, every single reporter abruptly stopped taking notes and began frantically texting their editors and producers. The president had just casually confirmed active federal proceedings against a sitting representative on live TV, instantly consuming the entire news cycle. The internal shift in AOC's body language was subtle but palpable to anyone watching closely. Her left hand, previously resting confidently on the table, was now pressed completely flat against the surface, the universal gesture of a person trying to physically stabilize themselves on shifting ground. When her attorney finally reached out to touch her arm, she allowed the hand to remain. Earlier in the evening, she had brushed away his attempts to counsel her, portraying the independent fighter who needed no help. Accepting the touch now signaled she realized she was in deep trouble. However, fighting back was the only reflex she truly knew, and she refused to sit silently in her home borough while a billionaire insulted her connection to it. She sprang to her feet, aggressively challenging Trump. She delivered an impassioned speech about the real queens, detailing a borough where minimum wages failed to cover soaring rents, where families juggled 3 separate jobs just to afford basic childcare, where local hospitals were shutting down, schools were physically crumbling, and the subway systems flooded violently during every rainstorm. She contrasted this harsh reality with his privileged Jamaica estates background, complete with lawn care services and specialized property tax attorneys. She defiantly claimed she served the true queens and warned him, "Don't you dare." Trump cut through her passionate smokescreen with 2 flat, grinning words. Crime rate. It was a precision strike, targeting the exact question her emotional speech was desperately attempting to dodge. He repeated his initial inquiry, noting that 40 minutes had passed since he first asked. This second failure was structurally and irreversibly worse. The first stumble could be excused as minor surprise. The second could not. For 40 minutes, her massive staff, armed with smartphones, high-speed Wi-Fi, and access to every federal database, had failed to locate a single crucial statistic about her own district while she was on national television. She stood in silence, either because she genuinely still did not know the number, or because she had finally learned that the 70% spike was accurate and confirming it out loud would be political suicide. Either way, the optics were disastrous. The most famous progressive congresswoman in America stood frozen before 11 million people, entirely unable to answer a fundamental question about the borough she claimed to champion. The defiant spark behind her eyes vanished. The lights were on, but the broadcast had lost its signal. Trump relentlessly hammered the point home. He, the guy living in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, understood the Queen's crime data better than the elected representative of Queens. While she was excellent at social media clapbacks, the borough desperately needed someone who understood the actual numbers. The gallery was well beyond simple reactions. They were in the silent, solemn process of forming a permanent judgment, much like a jury shifting from listening to a trial to actively weighing a verdict. In the AOC section, 2 young women carefully placed their Bronx Girl energy signs face up on the floor, abandoning them. Then Trump did something entirely unexpected. He completely dropped his showman persona. The jokes, the prop waving, and the grinning vanished. He adopted a plain, quiet voice that the millions watching had never heard him use the authentic tone of an older man from Queens giving serious advice to a younger woman from the same streets. Addressing her not as a political rival, but as a fellow local, he praised her immense, undeniable talent. He admitted she possessed a rare gift to move crowds, inspire donations, and make people genuinely believe in change, a different version of the same gift he possessed. But he questioned what she was actually using that immense platform and her 9.6 million followers for. He listed her misplaced priorities: Instagram, TikTok, the Met Gala, luxury hotels, and high thread counts. Meanwhile, for the people of Queens, she had delivered 0 meaningful laws, oversaw a 70% rise in crime, and actively chased away 25,000 potential jobs by driving out Amazon. He returned to the subject of his father's fence, confirming she was right about his sheltered upbringing, but demanding she recognize that his father built real, physical doors and keys for working families in Queens to live and raise their children behind. His father had provided more tangible help to the borough from behind his fence than she ever had while standing in front of every television camera in America. Lowering his voice to an almost private register, Trump delivered the defining line of the night: "Go home, Congresswoman." He clarified he was not telling her to be sent back in a malicious way, but urging her to actually return to her roots. He told her to go home without the cameras, learn the crushing cost of rent, learn the crime statistics, and learn the name of Gloria, the baker. He told her she needed to discover what a Corona bakery actually looks like at 4:00 a.m., because currently she had no idea, and the people of Queens knew she had no idea. The room did not applaud. Instead, it let out a massive collective exhale. It was the sound of a community recognizing a painful, undeniable truth spoken by an unlikely source. The borough was collectively realizing that the famous face on their television screens no longer recognized the neighborhood she claimed to represent. In the fourth row, a 60-year-old working woman in practical shoes wiped tears from her eyes. She was not weeping out of pity for AOC or support for Trump, but mourning for the Queen she remembered a place with jobs and local representatives who actually walked the streets. Her tears belonged solely to the Q44 bus line and the grueling 4:00 a.m. laundromat shifts. When offered a closing statement, AOC delivered a flawlessly spoken defense of her values, her mother, and the fight for justice. Her voice was perfect, but the room had already mentally checked out, akin to a concert audience politely waiting through an encore after the best song had already been played. She entirely ignored the damning numbers, the FEC complaints, the psychiatrist payments, and the private jets, reducing her rhetoric to hollow platitudes. Trump remained perfectly silent, content to let the devastating quiet do the work for him, achieving a rare moment of complete restraint. Backstage, AOC's communications director stared blankly at his phone, realizing his pre-drafted statement about her confronting Trump's privilege was completely useless. He deleted it, left staring at a blinking, empty cursor. The aftermath generated 3 distinct viral moments. The first was Trump laughing off her insult, pulling 41 million views in 3 days, proving that an unbothered laugh neutralizes political attacks instantly. The second was the competence test, the 0-minute gap where she failed to produce the crime rate, which garnered 33 million views as a stark example of a highly paid official failing at basic statistics. But the third clip, the quiet go-home advice, had the longest cultural lifespan. It resonated because it felt incredibly real and rare, coming from Trump, sticking with viewers long after the jokes faded. In week 1, AOC's office released a defensive statement dodging every factual accusation and blaming Trump's motives, which only served as a tacit admission of guilt, while the FEC formally confirmed the active investigations. By week 2, the term silly girl had been weaponized into standard political vocabulary used by late-night hosts and potential 2028 primary rivals to describe arrogant unpreparedness. Additionally, a watchdog group filed a new complaint using the exact contradictions she voluntarily provided on the town hall broadcast. By week 3, a primary challenger named Elena Vargas held a tiny town hall in a Corona church basement. Speaking to only 30 people, Vargas simply listed the local crime rate, the rent prices, and the cost of eggs, proving she actually lived the life AOC only tweeted about. And in Corona, at 4:00 a.m., Gloria Reyes unlocked her bakery. Before starting the dough, she watched Trump's go-home clip on her phone for the 4th time. Though she despised Trump's politics, she felt a profound agreement with the core message. As she faced a 23% hike in flour costs and an 18% rent increase, Gloria looked out her window into the pre-dawn darkness. She realized the harsh truth of the 2 kids from Queens who had shared that stage. One had finally come back home to the realities of the borough, while the other had to be publicly told to do so. And the real Queens was still patiently waiting to see what would happen next.